Hello and welcome. You're watching News Central. My name is Olisa Chukuma, and it's all about education we're talking about today on the program, where in 2020, yes, and with the pandemic, it's been all about technology redefining the classroom. I'm joined by the Honourable Commissioner for Education of Lagos State, Mrs. Folashade Adefisayo. Welcome to the show, ma'am.
Thank you for having me.
Right, ma'am. Thank you for being on the program. We have seen the classroom turned upside down, so to speak, with the pandemic. Tell us what has been the biggest challenge, especially from your commission, education in the pandemic, where the classroom is basically remote now.
It was a huge, I can't describe how it felt, because all of a sudden we were in class and all of a sudden there were no classes and the children were at home. So how do we ensure teaching and learning, especially because we understood our demographic. We knew that they didn't have easy access to data. They didn't have easy access to devices. They didn't even have easy access to lower level technology, sometimes like radio and television. So what should we do? And that was when we just put heads together. And I'll tell you that we had been planning for technology, integrating technology into the classroom. But we were doing it, at a measured pace. But this just forced us all to just move into solutions phase immediately. And we just knew we had to deploy as many technological solutions as possible to get as many children as possible learning throughout the pandemic.
Yeah. Learning in the pandemic where you're not in the classroom, no matter what level, whether it's primary, tertiary, or secondary, it's a challenge even for first world countries. I'm talking about countries in Africa, and states, so to speak. But I'm also keen to ask about, especially for Lagos State, the underprivileged, children and students who may not have that kind of access to such technology to aid in their non-classroom learning, as it were. How do we bridge that gap?
Well, we just had to, like I said, deploy a whole, let me call it a whole range of technologies. And from low-level technology like radios, I remember when we deployed radios, people were quite upset that in this day of the internet, but these are children in places where there was no service, they had no data, they had no devices. So we just started with radio, which is easier technology. And to our amazement, actually, we found that there were still children who couldn't afford radios. And these are possibly like 2,000 naira each. So we had to have a whole plan for raising funds. And we were given a lot of funds by people. And we were able to buy radios, deploy them to underserved and far away places, riverine communities and so on. And then from there, we now moved on to proper online. But we knew that, first of all, get them into that. So because we knew that if they were off learning for a long period, it might be difficult to get them back. So in the first instance, the easiest way we can get them into learning, let's try. Even then, there were still a lot of challenges. You heard Otto. Many of them are working children and they were still going to work.
Which is quite debilitating.
Throughout the pandemic,
Yeah, because education, anyone from the education sector, because the first thing we know is education is a lifelong process. And for there to be a sudden seizure or sudden, cut in that gap and where to implement technology, it's a bit of a challenge. So especially for Lagos State, after we've experienced this now, educationally wise, we've got the kids back in school somehow, Where do we go from here?
Well, certainly we can't go back.
Okay.
Certainly, we're not going to rest and say, well, they're back in school, let's go back to good old, same old. No, we are going to have to accept the fact that, accept the power of technology for teaching and learning. First of all, we weren't able to take them all in every day because of population. We just had to do a day on, a day off in many of our schools, which was painful again, because on the day off, what could we do? We tried to give them a lot of homework, a lot of worksheets. And for our primary schools, our technical partners actually donated MP3 players. So all the children, 450,000 children have MP3 players with which they can listen back to their lessons. And these are accompanied with workbooks, so they can actually do their homework on the workbooks and so on. So it's been quite challenging, but like all I would say is it has brought to fore and forced us all into a problem-solving mode. It has made us more creative, made us think of solutions we would otherwise never think of. So we can't go back to same old. We're just going to keep up the trajectory. Like I said, we are trying to source for 1 million devices
And these devices cost.
Yeah.
And the pandemic threw us into a situation where it became okay, we have to use remote learning and devices.
Yeah.
But we have to realize the inequalities between the
Yeah.
haves and the have-nots, and not letting those of the have-nots fall behind.
Yeah. I think that was why we started with the devices, so that we could also give out devices. So we gave out devices mainly to SS2, SS3 students, again in underserved communities across the state. And we had as many teachers as possible working on, you won't believe it, WhatsApp, which I thought was pretty strange, but the students actually were able to log into WhatsApp and send their homework and have it marked, and Telegram as well. So just deploying as many technologies as possible that could reach a particular demographic, which, like you said, possibly the children who are less economically endowed. Put it that way.
All right, just before we go, as the Commissioner of Education for Lagos State, if you were to if you had one message after this whole lockdown, pandemic, out of class, back in class, Zoom, teacher, students, parents, ecosystem, what would that be? What would that message be?
Well, what I'll say is that it's been a tough time, but I think tough times should challenge us. And what we are going through, for me, is just like a phoenix arising from the ashes. I believe that out of the ashes of this terrible event, and I'm not downplaying the event or making light of it, I feel that something great is going to come out of it. It's forced us all into a way of thinking that is utterly different, but is also going to lead to deep learning. I believe that deeper learning is happening now, rather than rote learning and cramming. By using all these technologies, children are learning in a more interesting and engaging way. So I urge us all to be positive and optimistic, that the future will be brighter.
Commissioner for Education.
Thank you very much.